Hey, I'm back with another video this week, just answering all of your questions. I got a ton, so let's dig in. If you have questions for me, just leave them in the comments below and I will answer them in a future video. SSG asks, learning a lot as a new hobby reseller. Question, I don't have a store, but I've been selling on eBay for 4 months. My monthly selling limit just jumped to 5 million items and 5 million per month. Is this normal? Yeah, actually that is normal. It's so funny. I've seen a lot of y'all talking about this in the comments and in our Flipwise Discord channel and on Reddit, just about the email that you get from eBay saying, hey, your monthly limits have increased to something astronomical, like $5 million. Like, oh, great, I can now list $5 million worth of inventory. I don't know why they do this. They've been doing it for a long time, though. You can go on Google and do some searches, and you can see upwards of 10 years ago people asking this exact same question, like, why did eBay suddenly increase my selling limit to $5 million? Or I think I've even seen like $50 million. I don't know. I mean, I think they want people to list as much as possible. I don't know why they're being so specific with these astronomical numbers and emailing you about them as if it's some sort of like gift to you. Like you can now do this thing that there's no way any one of us are actually going to do. So I don't know. It is kind of a normal thing. It just means your selling limits have been increased basically to infinite numbers. SDVLT asks, I noticed a reseller writes a long list of keywords in her description box. Does that actually help the algorithm wise, or when buyers write that specific keyword even though it is not in the title? Thanks. Good question. So this used to be a common practice many years ago, decades ago, not just on eBay, but on websites in general, is to kind of sneak in a bunch of additional keywords in the body of your website or in the description of your eBay listing so that you attract more attention on your listing. I would say that tactic, while you still see some sellers doing it, is an outdated tactic. I think search engines, including eBay's, are much more sophisticated these days, and they're going to do a much better job of delivering accurate results to buyers or searchers without having to rely on a list of generic keywords in the description. I don't think there's really any value in doing that these days. Think of it this way. You want your inventory to be put in front of as many people as possible that may want to buy your item. So it makes sense to use relevant keywords, and you should do that, but you should do it through the description. You should do it not hiding it in the description or listing off a bunch of irrelevant keywords. You should just do accurate titles, accurate descriptions, and accurate item details, and let eBay do the rest. eBay's entire business is generating sales through search. And so just trust that they're going to do a good job if you input the data correctly. I wouldn't try to hack it. I wouldn't try to sneak any keywords in there or anything. Just accurately describe your items and let eBay do the rest. Anthony asks, important question, do you or do you not put pineapple on pizza? I don't. Tyler asks, sometimes it will say 0 results for sold and there will be some. How do I figure out the sell-through rate when that happens? Yeah, so what Tyler's asking about here is when you search for something, sometimes it'll say nothing, no results found, but then it will give you suggested results or similar results that are of that product. And, and Tyler's asking, how do I determine sell-through rate there? So first of all, the reason that happens is because eBay's search relies on metadata being input on listings that humans have to put in there, and humans tend to make mistakes. And so that makes it difficult sometimes to produce accurate search results. And so sometimes you'll search for an item, it'll say 0 results, but it'll show some related listings that are actually the same listing. And that's probably because whoever listed that thing, you had a typo or used the wrong, product name or the wrong model number or whatever. Almost got it right, but got it not exactly right. And in that scenario, it is difficult to calculate a sell-through rate. But on my channel, I like to advocate for sell-through rate, not as a formula, a strict formula that you should use and calculate, in your head or with a calculator, but sell-through rate more as a feeling, which I get that is in contrast to like mathematical equations, but I just don't think of sell-through rate as a strict formula on eBay. I use sell-through rate to get a feeling for how long something is going to take to sell. And so the way I do that is I take a look at the total number of active listings. Let's say there's 100, the total number of sold listings. Let's say that there are 10. And just in my head, I'm like, okay, well, that's not a very good sell-through rate, right? There's 100 active listings. There's 100 competitors out there. There's 10 that have sold over the last 90 days. So that's, 3 people a month on average coming by to find this item and competing against 100 other people. Like, that just feels not good. That feels like a bad sell-through rate. In the reverse, let's say you have 10 actively listed and 100 sold. Well, that's a pretty good sell-through rate, right? There's only 10 available, and there's, people coming by more than once a day to buy. And so you can expect that thing to sell, in a matter of days or a week, maybe, not months. And so again, I'm not doing really any math at all in that scenario. I'm just getting a feel for it. Kay Goski asks, if you are just starting out, do you think it makes sense to cater towards the impossible to please buyers just to get the sale? I had one person like that I blocked on the account after the item was delivered. Granted, I specialize in retail orchid sales, which is a little different. You're right, that is a little bit different. That's an interesting category to sell on. One of the reasons I like eBay is there's so much variety in what you can buy and what you can sell and be successful in. To your question though, whether you're a new seller or an experienced seller, I never recommend that you go above and beyond for impossible to deal with buyers. There are a lot of crappy human beings out there. eBay is no different. As a seller, you're going to run into buyers who have crazy expectations, who go out of their way to make crazy demands. They kind of operate under this assumption that the buyer is always right and the seller should do everything to make the buyer happy. I'm not suggesting you don't have good customer service. You should be friendly, you should be polite. But as soon as you run into these buyers who you can tell have mismatched expectations, are going to bully you around and try to use the threat of negative feedback to get you to do whatever they want, I don't recommend that you kowtow to those types of buyers. If I run into those types of buyers before they've bought an item, I just block them immediately. I don't need their money. I don't want their money. Somebody else can buy my stuff. And if you've already sold to them and they have crazy demands, you don't need to bend over backwards for everyone. Still provide good, quick customer service, but don't meet crazy demands just to make a buyer happy, just so you won't get a negative feedback, for example. And so yeah, for a new seller, it can be kind of scary. You get a buyer who is demanding and you're afraid that they're going to give you a negative review or something. And so you try to do everything you can to prevent that, but don't do it. Just again, be polite, but don't bend over backwards. A lot of times buyers will try to force you into giving them a partial refund. Don't give partial refunds. If people aren't happy, tell them they can open up a return and send it back. And after you get it back, you can refund them. Most buyers who do that type of stuff will go away once you say you won't give them a partial refund and you require a return. So just stick up for yourself. Don't let buyers push you around. Most buyers on eBay are fine though. They're the problematic buyers. You're going to run into them if you sell enough, but they are few and far between in my experience. Candace says, I do not accept returns and never have, as it's a standard in the industry, antiques and collectibles. I regularly purchase no return items. I just read the seller's feedback, ask questions, and look at photos. A quality listing with accurate descriptions, quality goods, and exceptional customer service eliminates customer worry in the categories I sell in. So this is not a question, but Candace left a comment here that I wanted to call out because I think it's really important. In videos I've done in the past, I advocate for certain strategies like offering free returns, for example. But it's really important to remember that eBay supports such a wide variety of strategies that can be successful depending on a number of variables. And so just because you hear me say something or just because you hear another YouTuber say something does work or doesn't work, it doesn't necessarily mean it works for you or it's the best decision for your business. And so in this case, Candace is saying that, antiques and collectibles, it's sort of common that there's no returns and buyer expectations are different there, which makes total sense. And so if you're selling in a category where having returns doesn't make sense, it wouldn't be a good idea to turn returns on. So my point in calling Candace's comment out here is to remind you that take everything that I and others say with a grain of salt, do your own research, apply these strategies only if they make sense for you. I sell across all categories on eBay, a little bit of a mix of everything. And so the types of advice that I offer is sort of in line with people who do the same. It applies to other things, but it doesn't necessarily apply to all categories, for example, or all selling situations. So thanks for bringing that up, Candace. It's a good reminder to not always take advice without first thinking through whether it makes sense for your business. Celia asks, how do you track your mileage and do you figure mileage into your item cost? So I track my mileage using an app called Mile IQ. I think it's what it's called. Let me check. Yeah, Mile IQ. It's really handy. It costs $60 a year, so it is a paid product. But what it does, you keep it on your phone. It runs in the background. Every time it detects that you're moving in a car, it starts recording it. And then when it detects that you stop moving, it stops recording. And then it presents you with an interface to categorize those drives as either personal or business. It's a really slick interface. It's quick to do. So every time I get out of the car, I actually have an Apple Watch as well. It just pops up in there. It says, was that drive personal or business? I hit personal or business to categorize it. it, and it takes a few seconds every day basically to categorize all my drives. So to me, that's well worth it for $60, and I'm happy to pay for it. You also asks, I noticed some eBay sellers post lengthy policies and disclaimers with their items. Is there any benefit in that, or is it generally unnecessary and or a waste of time? The best way to think about it is eBay has a set of policies themselves. They have platform policies, and then they allow you to set your own policies on top of that. You can describe those policies in the descriptions of your items. I personally don't, because the vast majority of people just don't read those things. So I do think that it could be beneficial depending on what you sell. If the categories that you sell in and the types of items that you sell in require lengthier descriptions and calling out of very specific policies that may be outside of the norm of what a buyer expects on eBay, it could make sense to put those types of policies in there. And you can use things like eBay description templates to reduce the amount of time and effort it takes to apply those policies to all of your listings. I personally don't do it. I think most people are just not going to read it, and so I don't waste my time writing them there. And I just let the default eBay policies and the default user interface for buyers to describe those policies on the listing already do that job. But it's not going to hurt if you want to spend some time writing those things up and applying it. And I would just be prepared for most people not reading those policies. Philip asks, probably been asked a million times, but I'll ask again, do you suggest using a tool to make the background white or just placing the item on a white background? Actually, nobody's asked that question here on the channel, so happy to answer it. I personally prefer not removing the backgrounds from my photos, and I do that on purpose. I just think photos with the background removed look weird. They look out of context, and it's hard to determine lighting when the background's been removed. I just think it looks weird, and as a buyer, when I'm looking at items through eBay search and I see things within a floating white background, and it just looks weird. To me, it looks better when it's a well-photographed item on a clean background. It doesn't even need to be white, in my opinion. I know a lot of sellers think that the algorithm favors white backgrounds. I just don't think it really does. Plenty of things sell all the time without having a white background. I've definitely seen some very nice looking backgrounds. And in fact, I tend to use different backgrounds depending on the item. Like I sold a lawn chair not that long ago. Rather than put that on a white background, I photographed it out in the grass in its natural environment, which I just thought would do a better job of selling it. So anyway, I do think products look good on nice, clean white backgrounds. I do not think it looks good when you artificially remove the background and use a stark white background. So I don't do that. Spencer asks, hey, I love your videos. Thank you. I've been reselling full-time out of college for about 2 years now, mostly selling in the men's clothing category. This isn't really a reselling related question, but I would love to hear more of your background in product and software. My entrepreneurial spirit has gotten me interested in building a business startup in the future and would love to hear a bit of your story. Thanks. Sure, Spencer. Happy to share a little bit of that. So I grew up in the 90s. Ever since I was 12 or 13, I was making websites on the internet back in the mid 90s. And I've continued to do that throughout my adult life. I've done it professionally for the last 25 years or so in a variety of capacities. I started off as an engineer, like a web developer, sort of a front end, what you would call today a front end web developer. But over the years, I sort of lost interest in the engineering side of it. And I was more interested in the product side of it, the product management side of it. And so from a career perspective, I spent the last 2 decades or so doing product management in sort of the media space, the digital media space, things like news organizations, blogs, online magazines, things like that, helping to build tools for journalists to create stories on the internet. And so that's really been the focus of my career for a long time. But I've always had side projects going. I've always built stuff on the side. In fact, Flipwise started off as a side project, really that was like spreadsheet based. And then it was based in a product called Airtable. And then I partnered with my friend Michael to start to build it into an application of its own. And so I've just always been doing that type of stuff, for the last 25 years or so. Bill Cooper asks, we have a buyer who wants to return something, but insists on mailing the package back, asking for our address instead of opening a return request. We've asked several times, but they won't do it. And the return window of 30 days is almost up. What would you do? I think you're doing the right thing here. You should continue to tell the buyer if they want to open a return, there's a process for how to do that. And that is to open up a return through eBay, and they will then be given a shipping label and that can be sent back to you in in that case. And so there's nothing wrong with enforcing the policies that exist for sellers and buyers on eBay. If they don't know how to do that, maybe you could, if you really felt nice, you could walk them through how to do it. You could tell them to contact eBay. There's plenty of information out there. Somebody can figure it out in 5 minutes if they just open up the website or open up the app on their phone. They can find their order and find the return button and go through that process. And this buyer is just being a little bit unreasonable, and you should not go out of your way to give them your personal address or do anything really outside of what eBay requires that you do. So hopefully they do that before the return window is closed, because if it's closed, then they may not have the option to do it, or you're not bound by eBay policy to accept the return. You could still accept it if you're feeling nice, but you don't have to. ADJ Hunts asks, is there a way to get a listing reinstated that was removed for a product safety reason? It was a replacement blade for a recalled food processor blade for a Cuisinart DLC 8. I've sold the same style blade twice in the past with no issues, and there are multiple of them listed now, but they removed mine. I called and the eBay rep was not helpful. I tried explaining the blade I'm listing isn't the recalled blade, but that it replaced the recalled blade, but she didn't seem to care. Yeah, so this is definitely an issue. I've had this exact same issue with Cuisinart blades specifically. In fact, I've only had an eBay account suspension happen once, and it was because I sold one of these recalled blades from Cuisinart. So personally, I just stay away from them entirely. Even if they're not the recalled blades, I just don't sell any blades from Cuisinart at all, because I've already had a ding on my account related to it, and I don't want to get another one, and I don't want to risk a more permanent suspension of my eBay account. Like, selling one blade is just not worth it for me. So anytime I get a blade, I just redonate it. I don't try to sell it. And I would recommend you do the same. But it is kind of frustrating because you see lots of other listings live, even for the recalled blades, and lots of other listings sold for the recalled blades, but yours gets picked out for some reason and you get a ding on your account. It's one of the negative things about the whole Vero program. Is just, it seems like a crapshoot whether eBay is going to care or not. And so that's why I just don't risk it. I just don't sell anything related to a thing that I've been previously dinged on my account for. Casey asks, how should I set my payouts? So Casey, I think what you're asking about is how often eBay will pay you the money that you've earned. And I think you can set it on a daily basis, a weekly basis, maybe a monthly basis. Personally, I set mine at the weekly basis. I find it easier to do bookkeeping once a week versus once a day and keeping up with it in that way. So that's my personal preference, but maybe if you need access to the money more frequently, daily would make sense, or less frequently, monthly would make sense. But I personally stick with the weekly payouts every Tuesday. Zola asks, what are the pros and cons to leaving sold items in place with a quantity of 0? I do it mostly so that I can use the listing later for sell similar for an indefinite amount of time. Now I'm wondering if that makes me look like I have a ton of listings with low activity, which would ding my store in the algorithm. Thoughts? Yeah, so the question here is referring to a setting on eBay where you can make it so that your listings, when they sell, they remain active. And so it just shows up on eBay as an active listing, but a quantity of 0 and sold out. And there are some benefits to doing that if you plan to replenish the supply of inventory for that particular product. Let's say you have a multi-quantity listing that has 10 items in it. You sell out of those 10 items. You can, configure eBay to not close that listing, but keep that listing active and be out of stock because you plan on restocking it later. And that is the benefit, is because you can sort of build long-term value on this listing by keeping it active even when it's out of stock, so that you can keep replenishing it without having to recreate the listing and sort of start from scratch. Long-standing listings may be more valuable in search than newer listings for the same item. But this is diving into territory where I don't know the answer. Nobody knows the answer except for eBay. They just don't divulge these types of particulars about how their algorithm operates. So whether leaving a bunch of listings active with 0 units has a negative effect on your account from an algorithm perspective, I don't know. I don't imagine it would, but again, eBay doesn't make that information freely available. So I can't comment one way or the other with a definitive answer. And neither can anyone else except for eBay, and I doubt they will. I personally think it's kind of messy to do that, to have a bunch of active listings that aren't actually active and can't actually be sold unless I was going to replenish them. So I don't do that at all. And I would recommend you do the same for that reason. You can sell similar off of all sorts of items, not just your own. You can sell similar off of other people's items. And so having your item to sell similar from, in case you happen to get a duplicate later, I just think it's not that valuable because you can sell similar off of any number of listings out there that are similar. It doesn't have to be your own. All right, a couple similar questions here. Adam asks, I'm still curious about the views on my items going down. I understand it only displays views in the last 30 days, but I have an item that is listed only 4 days ago that showed 12 views yesterday, and now it only shows 8. Yeah, so what Adam's referring to is a question that I had in a previous video about why the number of views on your inventory on eBay go down, like the page views, the number of people that have viewed them go down. And my explanation for that was that it's a rolling 30 days, the total number of views. And so it's only accounting for the last 30 days. And so once a day moves off from being the last 30, it's no longer counted. And that causes the total number of views for a product in your inventory to go up and down. But what Adam's question is, and there's another question similar, this guy says, okay, buddy, then why do my total views for a certain day go down over the next few days? It'll say 650 views on Sunday night, but by Wednesday, Sunday's views say 590. Same goes for impressions. Why is eBay lying to us? Seems criminal. Right, so the question is slightly different. It's not the last 30 days of views, but it's like, hey, on this specific day, on Sunday, it said there was 500 views. Then a few days later, I checked Sunday's views and it said there was only 480. It was like 20 views missing. What's the deal? And so while I would love for this to be a huge conspiracy theory, the reality is companies that work with large amounts of data like this and page view data like this, for example, have to do some normalizing of that data. And so in eBay's case, what they're doing is after the fact, they're removing views that come from non-humans. It has systems in place to go back and say, okay, of these 500 views, we detected that 10 of them came from bot activity and were not humans. And so we're going to cut those out. To you as the seller, appears that the total number of views that you have gotten have shrunk based on what they told you before. The reality is you never had those views in the first place. It was a robot hitting your listing to do something, to scrape data from it or something like that. So, and eBay does talk about this on their website here under how machine or bot traffic is removed from your listings. It says filtering is done in 2 stages. Bot traffic is identified and removed from your page view count in near real time, and a secondary filter process performs a deeper analysis on a daily basis and removes bot traffic that may have not been caught in the initial filtering, and this can cause your page views to decrease. I'd love for it to be a conspiracy, but it's not a conspiracy. It's just some data normalization going on. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, YouTube thinks you might like this other video of mine, so check it out.